BBC Radio Leicester.
Well, good morning. Hello. 5 minutes past 8 this Thursday morning. It's the 23rd of August. I'm with you for another hour, and then Ed Stagg is sitting in for Ben Jackson between 9 and 12. But in the next hour, the BBC has announced it's to tell the story of the Elephant Man, Joseph Merrick, who was born in Leicester. Well, a local author who's researched his life gives her reaction. It's also been the inspiration for me to ask you this morning about your favourite remakes musically, the cover versions you love. Give me a call, 0808 100 1049. Also, President Trump has admitted providing hush money for two women who claim they had affairs with him, but he's denied breaking finance campaigning laws. As the pressure ramps up, what next for the president? It's a big day for teenagers across the country. Thousands receiving their GCSE results this morning. Probably in the next 20 minutes or so, those brown envelopes will be ripped open. Well, after 8:30, you'll be hearing from students at a Leicester college where weeks of waiting has finally come to an end. But first, campaigners say they are getting increasingly worried about changes proposed for Leicester's hospitals. In fact, some claim that without clearer detail about these plans, patients could be put at risk. We've known for a while now that the main services, which are currently carried out in 3 hospitals across the city, are going to be reduced to 2, effectively downgrading the General Hospital. And with the budget deficit for the NHS in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland predicted to rise to £400 million over the next 5 years, there's certainly an economic case for it. But Dr. Janet Underwood and her team, based at the Health Policy Research Unit at De Montfort University, have big concerns about these changes. They say there hasn't been proper consultation. She's been speaking to Tim Parker.
Probably one of our biggest concerns is the fact that a lot of the detail is in the appendices, not in the public domain. So it stops us evaluating fully the plans. What's actually happening is they're moving level 3 intensive care beds from Leicester General to Glenfield Hospital. That means that major operations such as kidney transplant, liver operations that are currently taking place at Leicester General will also have to move to Glenfield. That's part of national policy. The General will eventually become something like a community hub. The acute hospital status of the General Hospital will have been lost.
But 3 acute hospitals in one city is unprecedented elsewhere. Campaigners point out these serve a growing city and 2 counties, not just Leicester.
The UK has far fewer beds per thousand of the population than in Europe. In Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, there's even less beds per thousand of population. So we're actually in a state of needing to have more beds.
Perhaps most worrying are researchers' claims that there'll be medical risks for patients in making these changes.
They're going to split 3 clinical services across 2 sites. These are kidney transplant, liver operations and urology. For kidney transplant, they are going to be removed from all the facilities at the Leicester General Hospital, including the dialysis machines, which are necessary for maintaining life. And it's not clear, and we need more information as to where these patients are going to dialyse.
Tonight at a Health Commission meeting at Leicester City Council, there'll be public questions asking why the closure and transfer of the intensive care unit out of the General Hospital got approval in 2015 without public consultation, because it was argued it was needed for public safety reasons, and yet the unit is still open.
This needs to be formally consulted upon in public with full information, and that way people can add their views, they can bring their own expertise and their own experiences to ensure that the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland end up with a hospital service that is fit for purpose.
Well, with me from the hospitals is Medical Director of the Hospitals Trust, Anthony Furlong. Morning. There's a lot in there. So, sorry, Andrew. Yeah, so what did I say? Anthony, sorry, it says Andrew in front of me. I do beg your pardon. It's that time of the morning. A lot in there that you heard. Lots of different things that are being sort of mulled over and discussed and worried about. But let's take a step back a moment and put this in context and tell me why the changes have been implemented in the first place?
Morning, Joe. So happy to do that, and happy to be here to talk about what I think are things that will improve safety in Leicester, actually, for patients. So setting some context behind this, your listeners may or may not be aware that prior to 2000, University Hospital of Leicester didn't exist. There wasn't one trust. So there were 3 hospitals in Leicester at the time. So the Leicester General, the Glenfield, and the Leicester Royal Infirmary. And the legacy of that is that they developed their services in their own ways. So what we now have is we have services that are located not necessarily in the way that you would provide modern healthcare and not necessarily meeting modern healthcare standards. And the consequence of that is that we've got duplication and, in some cases, triplication of services. To give you some examples of that, we have 2 general surgical takes, so emergency general surgical work goes through 2 of our hospitals. We have 2 neonatal units, we have 2 maternity units, and we have 3 ITUs, intensive care units. And what modern healthcare standards and what the Royal Colleges and others are telling us is that this is increasingly clinically unsustainable, and in itself will create safety risks for patients in the longer term, because we struggle almost on a weekly basis to meet the modern standards that are required for staffing some of those units. I'd like to stress to people that there is no issues with safety at the moment, but it is a constant pressure for us. Now, things came to a head in 2015 for intensive care when our senior consultants, our senior doctors and our senior nurses came to speak to people like me to say that the situation at the Leicester General had reached a tipping point. And the reason for that, well, there were 4 reasons for that. The first was that the intensive care unit at the Leicester General had been downgraded, so it had lost its training status, which meant that doctors in training could no longer go there to get training. We'd also were facing a number of senior consultants who were about to retire, and despite multiple attempts to try and recruit, we were unable to recruit new consultants to work in the unit, and that was partly as a consequence of the fact that the unit had lost its training recognition.
And that was 3 years ago, though, wasn't it? So one of the concerns is that that quite a lot of time's passed, and at that point it was deemed to be not fit purpose might be a bit strong, but concerns about it that you're outlining. So we're a long way down the
absolutely.
The road.
And one of my frustrations is it has taken this long to get to where we are. So in 2015, we had to take those concerns very seriously because they weren't made lightly, and quite rightly we tested them, but we were clear that we had reached a tipping point with the Leicester General. So as a consequence, we outlined a paper in terms of some proposals which essentially involved coalescing, moving the 3 units to 2 units in line with the longer term plan that you made reference to in terms of moving from 3 to 2 ultimately. So we took that paper to the Health Oversight and Scrutiny Committees in Leicester and Leicestershire in the spring of 2015. And the case we made was that we needed to get on and do this because there were significant concerns. The Health and Oversight Scrutiny Committees agreed and didn't feel that it was in the best interest of the public of Leicestershire.
Why not, though? Because the public are the ones who are going to be treated, who will have the consequences of any moves and decisions. It seems very curious that there isn't wider public consultation on what is a crucial service.
Well, because at the time we felt that the situation was such that we needed to get on and do this relatively quickly. It's a great regret to me that it's taken this long to do that.
It hasn't happened. Maybe there could have been room for public consultation after all.
Well, with hindsight, but at the time we were convinced by the clinicians that things were at a tipping point. The reason it's taken this long is it's simply taken this long to secure the central funding. The reason we've been able to keep the unit going and we've not seen it fall over is because we have been able to, through essentially the goodwill and discretionary effort of staff that currently work there, and by recruiting people on the promise that we have a plan that's backed, that is going to involve new facilities, we've been able to recruit people to keep that service going. But I think I strongly believe that if we hadn't have had that plan, we'd have been talking about closing that unit because we couldn't keep it going.
What about those concerns, though, that sort of splitting services for kidney patients, for example, and issues with liver patients, that are still essentially there's toing and froing, and that could ultimately lead to problems, real concerns there that there are safety issues, medical risks potentially? I'll
deal with the kidney one specifically in a minute, but I think it's important for people to realise that our services are split anyway. We've got 3 hospitals at the moment, and on a daily basis, patients will be moving between those 3 hospitals because of the fact that our services aren't joined up. The longer-term plan takes us from 3 to 2. To be frank, if money was no object, I think what Leicester needs is 1 hospital.
A super hospital.
A super hospital. But that being pragmatic, that's probably unaffordable for Leicester and Leicestershire. So the 3 to 2 is a pragmatic solution that tries to bring services that need to be next to each other. But we accept that there's some compromise in that. Dealing with the specific allegations around the renal transplant service, we have worked with the clinicians, and this plan is backed by the clinicians as clinically safe. The specific question that was raised about dialysis, the beds that will go to the Glenfield Hospital all are what are called plumbed in, so we're able to provide dialysis for those patients, so the renal transplant patients that need it at the Glenfield. So we have sought to address the concerns.
Are you satisfied then with the plan as it stands at the moment? Do you feel that patients will be sufficiently safe under these arrangements?
I would, as medical director, I would not put my name to anything that I did not feel was safe. I think it's also important for people to realise that this is a phase in a bigger plan. So this is a £30 million investment that starts to allow us to do what is a £367 million plan for Leicestershire that involves moving our services from 3 to 2.
How long is it going to take then?
Well, this bit we'll start the work in October, and it will be this part of the plan will be finished by 2020. The wider plan is going through the process that it has to go through at the moment. So there's quite a complicated process, but we've just been through something called the pre-consultation business case. We've just presented the plan to the East Midlands Clinical Senate, which is a group of senior clinicians from all around the East Midlands. And they have given very strong backing to the plan, the £367 million plan, as making clinical sense and that will deliver modern healthcare for patients in Leicester and Leicestershire.
OK, Andrew Furlong, thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning. You're listening to Breakfast on BBC Radio Leicester. It's 17 minutes past 8. Helen has your headlines.
East Midlands Ambulance Service has apologised to patients